Hello and welcome to Indie Encounter. My name is Sandra Laraine Coleman. The mission of our show is to give independent performers and artists access to as wide an audience as possible, and to give you, our viewers, a window into their art, their artistic process, and why they have chosen their particular avenue to connect with the world. All art is about communication and connection. Let's meet today's indie artist, Isaac Sundiata. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. It's such a wonderful blessing and a gift to have you here, not only as an artist, but as a man that moves in, how would you say, the cultural environment of today. How do you, like the whole writing process, how did you get into it? What made you decide?
Well, I think even in high school I was writing, and I was on, I think they called it then original oratory. And I went to Compton High, and I took them to national qualifiers as the first person to make that school noted in something other than sports.
Wow.
And so from there I kept writing, and I started writing and going to this place called the Watts Writers Workshop. And I used to ride my bike there. I remember I had even at 13 I used to go up there because like I used to ride my bike up there, and there was a lot of really, really good poets there. And it was a turbulent time in the 60s, and most of the work that came out of that era was very revolutionary work. I enjoyed it. I continued doing this, and I think that with artists, we have a responsibility to talk about more than just art for art's sake.
Right.
And I've constantly wanted to purvey things that weren't usually talked about in the media, or exactly how the people felt from a certain aspect.
Right, so in other words, you were kind of being the voice for maybe people who either didn't know how to express it, or maybe they were too afraid to express it.
Or had no voice.
Or had no voice. So, so now that you have taken on this responsibility, besides writing poetry, what are some other things that you do with the art? Like, I know you have a venue, I know you have product.
Yes.
So.
Well, I love traveling, and I've traveled a lot, and everywhere I go I meet poets from all of these different places, or spoken word artists, or I constantly talk about what's the difference between poetry and spoken word.
Right.
And I really like all the genres of storytelling. And I remember even growing up, it was so many storytellers. I mean, just about all the R&B music that we heard in my era was storytellers.
Right.
And the stories my grandmother and grandfather would tell, and the stories you'd listen to when you were quiet and they didn't know you were in the room.
Right.
And Africa was no different. When I went to Africa, I would hear hundreds of stories. When you're devoid of radio and TV, you rely more on what people do to tell you about things that you may encounter or have encountered, or historically how things can come about again, and you'll recognize them when you see them. So I constantly use poetry to purvey that whenever it was possible, and I think that's the responsibility of a griot. A griot is the person that brings the message from one village to the next.
Right.
And so I try to be the griot.
Right. And I was going to ask you about the griot, because my understanding of griot, or actually the griots are more like the village historian,
Right.
where they have all the information from the beginning of the village to the present, and they keep the village, the tribe alive with the information that they have.
Definitely.
So is that the correct definition?
Well, when it got here in New Orleans, it's something called Griot, you know,
Right.
the French pronunciation. But griot, the griots, yes. I mean, even in their names, to know their names would be to know who they were and where they came from, what job they had, you know, and I think that's why they gave me that name Sundiata in Africa, because I remembered a lot of the stories that were told to me here. And I had went to one place in Africa. I was near Benin and going into Nigeria, and they took my books. I had some books that I always give books away to the people to tell. They were history books about things that happened here. Harriet Tubman, Henry Box Brown, you know, all kinds of different books about what happened to us after
we came here.
Slavery.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and they took the books, and I had to remember the story. They took it at the border. Don't ask me why. They didn't want me bringing in books. But I remembered the stories, and I told them, and they shared stories with me. I'd always said that I was going to write a children's book about some of the children's stories that they tell their children. It's kind of like our fairy tales. They call them spider tales.
Right, because Anansi the spider is supposed to be the original storyteller.
Exactly.
And that's a beautiful thing. Now, from some of the stories that you hear, just like anything else, inspiration, do those stories that you've heard, do you incorporate maybe some of those things that you heard in your own work, or do you use it as inspiration, or how do you, what's the process with that, or is there a process? Do you just...
Well, I think the basic beginnings of inspiration, there is no process. I mean, you're inspired to go somewhere and start writing about something, so that initial first paragraph, sentence, or word even, comes from inspiration. After that, you go into your process. I think your process is developed over a period of time. Writing itself is not a hard task, but I think as you develop yourself as a writer, the editing is where it all comes to play. Sometimes you edit 5, 6 times, and sometimes, rarely though, you can write it and it's done.
Right.
But that's a real rarity.
Right.
I think to get 5 pages down to 1 good page is really shows the test of a real writer.
Absolutely, because sometimes, well, I noticed some writers maybe need a little more room than others. Like maybe there's a writer that feels like they need 5 pages, and then there's other writers that are not so wordy and, you know, want it cut down to 1 page. And I guess it all depends on what you're writing, because 5 pages for a story is great.
Yes.
You know, but for a poem, not so great.
Yeah, I think it comes with what metaphors you've learned to use, how you've made sure that you didn't say the same thing twice. I mean, it comes with, when you have a circle of other artists that you deal with, it's always, and you know this, we call each other, hey, tell me how this sounds.
Right.
When you use the same people every day that really have a heartfelt love for you, and they're scared to say, well, I didn't quite like that, you know, or they say, we love it, so that's great, you know. There's a lot of church groups will do that, or your family will do that. When we step outside that genre and you ask people to really tell you, you know, what do you really think of this? Now you're getting into a critique. And you have to be not thin-skinned to deal with that critique. And as artists, we have a group that will deal with each other like that. And we'll call each other at 3 in the morning, you know, when we're writing, and get that inspiration, say, what do you think of this? You say, hey, you know what time it is? Yeah, I know. And you do too, answer me.
And you're absolutely right, because there is you know, everybody has their go-to guys.
Yes.
You know, in the poetry community. So, you know, tell me about this and tell me about that. Now, besides writing and product, you also host a venue.
Oh, the venue.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Shades of Africa. It's a venue in Long Beach. That's the name of the place that it's located. My particular venue is called the Griot Cafe. And we've been doing it now for 5 to 6 years. I also host their Kwanzaa every year. But the cafe, I have 3 drummers who are like, when people say they have drummers, these guys are like phenomenal. They're excellent. They are really professional drummers. They go around and play with a lot of professional people. And I'm really blessed to have them there with me every weekend to do this when I'm there. A lot of times I do other things. I have to do radio shows or something else that we do it on. And I call on people to help host the venue when I'm not there. I've called on you to help me.
Yes, and speaking of venue, we'll the Griot Cafe, which is an open mic hosted by Isaac Sundiata at Shades of Africa, which is in Long Beach. So if they want to get more, if our audience wants to get more information, then they can go to Shades of Africa website.
shadesofafrica.com.
Okay.
You can, I have my product there in their Facebook page.
Okay.
I have 3 CDs. I think the first one is called Psalms of Sundiata.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is called Sata, one I made in Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
Sata means to sit and think about it.
Okay.
And the third one is not complete yet. I was working on one with some African artists, and it is really going to be spectacular if we ever get it finished. It's a slow process. It's done with some musicians from Fela's band, Fela Anikulapo Kuti from Nigeria.
Wow, that's heavy.
Yeah.
That's like high power.
High powered.
now that
Afrobeat is something that if you haven't heard it, you really got to hear Afrobeat.
It's amazing. And now that we've talked about your venue and your product, may we please hear some Isaac Sundiata?
Okay, I chose a few pieces. This is a piece I use it to talk about inspiration of poems. It's called Motivations in Search of a Poem. I want to write a poem that informs the people of their plight and puts them on a path that makes things right. I don't care if I have to write all night. I want to write a poem that touches the souls and hearts of those that hear and somehow seems to subside their fear. I don't care if I have to write all year. I want to write a poem that eases the pain of those that ache from social ills they cannot shake and transmits positive energy and tells our story and doesn't hide the truth no matter how gory. I want to write a poem that purifies the souls of the young and old and describes the plight of lives not told and unites the visions of men of peace who gave so much and took the least. Of shipwrecked thoughts of better days so they would not fade or become a haze. I want to write a poem that will make our queens take their throne in the place that they reside and give Uncle Toms a sense of responsibility and pride and makes brothers hard and sisters wet and gives them an orgasm they'll never forget. A poem that repairs broken hearts and you can't tell where it ends or where it starts, whether they push ideas or shopping carts. That penetrates cosmic vibrations and will honor the ancestors with verbal libations and will stop negative thoughts and wicked temptations. I want to write a poem. I want to write a poem. I want to write a poem that you can feel the weight of my passion and won't become the latest verbal fashion. Well, subterranean thoughts will give street level reality and closed minds will wake to a stronger mentality. And mothers won't paint their cheeks with tears and the enemy of their children won't be their peers. Because we will not weep for the ones that are not born, who bear the brunt and endure the scorn. I want to write a poem that my people will have the humility to receive and the commitment to achieve and the discipline to maintain for what they can definitely gain. That can put kings' dream in arm's reach and you won't have to lecture or constantly preach. That shows a tolerance of a people that ain't got no museum. And you'll understand their plight whenever you see them. A poem like the smell of mama's cooking when it was in the pot and the very first kiss that you ever got. A poem like the people that got the blues and ain't got nothing and nothing to lose. A poem that can make you change your politics and your religion because you gained a higher calling and a stronger vision. I want to write a poem. I want to write a poem. I want to write a poem. But until then, this will have to do.
Wow, that was wonderful. Now, you know what I like? I like the contrast you use. You go from one end of the spectrum to the other. How do you come up with those dynamics in your
I think
writings?
a lot of people say that I paint a pretty vivid picture with a lot of the things that I do.
You do.
I guess the storyteller that's deeply innate within me. I know a lot of people come along now and are influenced by other poets. And that's nothing new. We've all been influenced by people. I've been in the company of Oscar Brown Jr. and you know, to his house. And before he died, I really enjoyed conversations with him. And he's a really good storyteller, my mentor. And there's people like Amir Baraka. I've shared the stage with him.
Wow.
And I really enjoy these people. We have these people come to the venues. You got to come and really enjoy what we have there. We try to bring this to the community so the younger people will have a chance to hear this. And I tell them all the time, without bebop, there wouldn't have been any hip hop. So,
Absolutely.
you know, you got to learn the history of it and keep it going.
And keep it going. And even the history before bebop, because
that.
they got
Yes,
their rendition of
definitely.
the art from somewhere too. So when we're telling the young people, now that's a question for you, like what you just said, you know, tell the young people to come out and hear, but what advice would you give like a young artist starting out, from your perspective and what you've seen and where you've been? Because you mentioned the Watts riots and you mentioned the Watts Prophets. So
well, I think one of the things that I constantly tell young people is to, you know, it seems as though when somebody popular gets on the scene and they really make it and everybody's like raveling after them, don't try to sound like that person.
Right.
You have to find your own space and your own niche. It's possible to get on that same cadence that everybody gets on. But in developing and growing in this genre that we deal with, you learn to develop where you stand in it. And as with growing too, you learn more confidence in yourself, you know, and so that comes with just the maturity in the art. Yeah.
Okay, so now that you know where you've been in the art, you know, like like what you're doing now, like where do you see yourself in the future as far as like poetry? Do you want to continue venues? Do you want to?
Well, I always tell artists that, especially artists of color, I tell them that, you know, you can't have just doing art for art's sake. You have a responsibility to your people, your village, your community, to actually tell some of the things that never got told from those places.
Okay.
I can see myself working, I'm working right now, matter of fact, with a organization with the homeless, national organization with the poverty and homeless people. We do poetry for it. We have a whole poetry troupe that we write about those things, and we get them out there, make CDs for it, sell them, and so we can support them in getting into housing and things. We also have we're just now starting a discussion on racism, which is something, you know, it's really ironic, all the things that are going on. People really, you know, we're exploring all kinds of things and we've never really explored each other. And I think to break down those barriers, we were just talking about Africa not too long ago. Africa has been in the spotlight since the soccer thing in a good light, more than you've ever seen it, you know, in any other light. You know? So it's really amazing how things, turnabout of things have come to really look at things in a different light, and the poets have a responsibility to bring that to their peers and everywhere else that they go. And
so sometimes poetry can not only be political, but you know, it can be fun, it can be funny.
Oh, yes.
And I know you have a piece that I really like, and I would appreciate if you would share that right now.
All right, this piece that you're talking about, it's a piece that I wrote about. It's about food, and we always talk about. I said, you know, I wasn't always this fat. And we would get out and we'd work out, and as kids, man, you know, you might have saw one fat kid on the block.
Maybe.
You know, and now you may see one thin kid on the block.
Maybe, yeah.
You know? But food is really it's really I think it's, you know, definitely what's in it. And you know, the four major food groups are not frozen, fast junk and microwave. There's a lot to it, and you know, when you go out and eat out a lot, and I'm single, and it's really hard for me to get into cooking, and my dad was a great cook, but you know, I'm so busy doing so many other things, and but I eat raw more now, and I'm getting at it, and I play a lot of tennis, so it's starting to happen again, but it's seriously a chore as you get older.
Right.
And I just had a birthday, and I'm knocking on 60's door. It's crazy.
Wow.
I thought 40 was old, and now.
Well, you're beautiful. You don't look it. Hey.
So this piece is called Voices, and it goes like this. Food be calling me when I'm in bed. Visions of munchies fill my head. Food be calling me when I'm trying to sleep. But my stomach's growling and my willpower's weak. Cause food be calling me when I exercise, knowing I can't eat no more cakes and pies. Food be calling my name when I'm trying to fast and I break down and eat because it just don't last. Food calls me when shove things down my throat. Am I a man or a freaking goat? Health food, junk food, they both have a voice, but when they call me, I don't make a choice. They be screaming, talking about ice cream, but I law the line at canned goods and applesauce and extra large black pitted olives and everything else in the can is earthquake food. But there have been them nights that I felt tremors. Ever go to bed, how I get up and eat and wonder why? Because food was calling and you lay there stalling, but you eat to shut it up so you can sleep. Now, I know some of y'all don't eat after a certain time, and that's when the voice start crying. Be calling you to have a bag of chips or two. I tried not to buy it, but the voice said, try it, try it, try it, try it. It got louder when I was in store, and it pimped me like I was a whore. The voice got louder when I stopped smoking, and I gave in quickie because it wasn't joking. Feed me, feed me, feed me. A little shop of horrors was in my head. I dare not close my eyes and try to go to bed. Maybe I'm possessed by a fat demon. Should I see a priest, a shrink, or a dietitian? One of them should be able to make the voice go away. Tired of waking up with crumbs the next day. I saw a priest, but he was fat, and he said he heard it too. He said, oh, hell, I should be confessing to you. I saw a shrink, and he was eating while I was telling him my dilemma, and he said, see a surgeon if you want to look slimmer. Now, as for the dietitian, he told me to feed the voice healthier and less. Believe me, I've done my best. Triple X ain't so bad, but eating too much is kind of sad. Now, me and the voice, we get along, but you never see me in spandex or a thong.
I love that piece.
You too. That's such an old piece.
But it's something that everybody can relate to. I mean, at one time or another, we've had because I go through this thing with chips.
Oh,
you know, chips is my thing. And right now, it's the Lyman Lay's. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but I love them. And I'll eat the whole bag. So it's, like I said, it's something that everybody can relate to. So poetry can not only be like political and, you know, some people write love
It's informative.
poetry.
I don't really,
right.
It's just really informative.
Right.
I mean, what's political and what isn't just depends upon who's listening and who's grading it. You know?
Absolutely. and who can get something out of but clearly everybody can walk away from that particular piece with something. So when you listen to other artists that you have, like maybe coming through your venue or go to a venue, what is it that you look for?
Well, we have days that we do critiquing and workshops, and in the workshops, I think that the artists really get a lot more out of the workshops than they would ever get out of just writing their piece and getting up and performing it, which it takes a lot of nerve to get to the mic, you know. But once you've passed that stage, you really need to really hone in on your pieces and learn how to get them so your metaphors are better, or you don't use the same words, or you get an inspiration that you can go off into. You don't get into a tangent with certain things. It's all kinds of things that can be done in the workshop to get your niche in this poetry thing that we call poetry or spoken word or whatever it is you want to do. We got rappers and comedians and musicians and all kinds of people that come through.
Well, what is a song but a poem set to music?
I've always said Smokey was one of my favorite poets.
I know that's right. Him and Marvin Gaye.
There you go.
Yep. Yeah. So another question that I would like to ask you is, we talked earlier about radio, and so how do you, like, performing live is one thing, radio is another thing. What's it like to actually be on the radio doing your spoken word?
I think I feel so comfortable on the radio because I read a lot. I always say that I strategize, I don't memorize, and for reading I never apologize. And reading, I know it. I actually know my pieces, but there have been times that I've ran one piece into another piece and didn't realize it, you know, because I have over 300 and something poems. last count, because
Wow.
I've been doing it since the 60s.
Wow.
And it's really interesting. I just started dating them. It's interesting to see what has stood the test of time. You know, because some pieces you can hear, you can feel and see and hear the datedness in the piece. It doesn't make it a bad thing, but some have, like, you wouldn't believe that it was written that long ago.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, well, we want to thank you so much for coming and sharing all the information with us. Again, it's shadesofafrica.com.
SageofAfrica.com.
And so, or we can even Google Isaac Sundiata.
You can do Sundiata8 at AOL.com.
Okay, and that's how we can get in touch with you,
Yeah.
because I'm sure the audience would love to get your product.
My
and come
drummers
to
and
your
I,
venue.
we go to all kinds of school venues and things like that. We'd love to come out and just let us know. My sister is a principal. We've been to her school and a lot of other schools around all communities.
Okay.
My brother is a priest here in this community.
Absolutely. So thank you very much again. This
Thank you.
has been Indie Encounter, a journey into the world of the independent creators of art and artistic communication. I want to thank today's guest, Isaac Sundiata, for sharing his vision and poetry with us. If you want to find out more about today's guest, check him out on the web by typing his name into your Google browser. For more about the show, check out our website here at Pasadena Community Network, PasadenaCommunityNetwork.com, and select the Arroyo channel. Thanks to our director, Lilia F. Gaspar, and crew for making this show possible. Thanks to all of you. We hope to see you here again when we embark on another Indie Encounter. Thank you.
Thank you.